New York Giants tight end Darren Waller is expected to retire, and this move opens up an opportunity for rookie tight end Theo Johnson out of Penn State. We're going to talk about that and more coming up next.
You are Locked On NFL Draft, your daily podcast covering the NFL Draft. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Locked On family? Welcome back to the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast, your daily podcast covering your favorite draft prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your boy, Damian Parson, always on the ones and twos. You can find and follow me on X at DP_NFL. I'm a senior draft analyst, and thank you for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen today and everyday shot for being our everyday. As you know, I got to kick this intro to my guy, Mr. LSU himself, Keith Sanchez. You can find and follow him on X at TheTalentCode. Can you talk to him, baby?
What's up, Locked On family? Let's get locked in. This is Keith Sanchez, 2019 national champ, man. And the other side to this dynamic duo that we like to call the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast. I want to start this podcast off by saying shout out to our everydayers. Thank you for tapping in with us each and every single day. DP, we talking an action-packed show, man. Some conversation surrounding those OTAs and those rookies and those second-year players that have to perform. We're going to start this thing off in New York. We're going to New York City, man. Darren Waller slated to retire, or the conversations about him retire, that opens the door for Penn State rookie tight end Theo Johnson. And then we're going to get into the conversation. Rich, second year, most important year, but who's he's building a chemistry with? Josh Downs, second year player Josh Downs. And then we're going to wrap this thing up with under the radar guy for the Jaguars, Penn State wide receiver, former Penn State wide receiver, Parker Washington, making strides in OTAs. But DP, before we get into this conversation, man, why don't you hit him with our title sponsor?
Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Darren Waller, the report came out finally that he is expected to make his decision by next week's minicamp for the Giants on his playing future, and everybody around the team is expecting him to retire. Keith, came into it was. I think I found out in Detroit at the draft that was kind of coming down the pipeline, coming down the timeline eventually, and we're here now. And what does that do? That opens up the opportunity for rookie tight end Theo Johnson. I'm not going to forget the fact of they have Daniel Bellinger there as the kind of tight end 2 behind Waller. So I expect him to be the tight end 1 if Waller does in fact retire. But with Theo Johnson, if you go back to his draft profile, 6'6", 260 pounds, 33-inch arms. He jumped 39.5, a 10.5 broad. He had a 4.57 40-yard dash. This is from a raw athleticism standpoint, this is an explosive athlete. You know what I mean? And then you see him, Penn State, did not have a great passing attack in 2023.
That's to say it nicely, DP. That's
yeah.
To say that nicely.
gotta try to keep it PR. Keith, gotta keep it PR. But they didn't have a good passing offense. But when the reps that you saw, when you watched and studied, Theo Johnson, you saw a guy that could run routes. You saw a guy that could get open. But you also saw a guy that was outstanding in the blocking situation, whether it's pass blocking, when you want to go to max protect, or run blocking, moving guys off the ball, sealing and creating those soft edges for running backs to be able to run off of his hip and get to the outside, to the perimeter. I think, especially with Brian Daboll as the head coach, we know what he can do from an offensive standpoint and how he can get the best out of players. I'm excited for Theo Johnson. I'm excited. Don't get me wrong. I love watching Darren Waller as a player. When he's locked in, he's healthy. He's a mismatch as a tight end, man. Like, he's a former wide receiver with 4.4 speed. Not many linebackers can run with him. Not many safeties can cover and play with him at the catch point. But if he's going to retire, this training camp is going to be big for Theo Johnson, and the preseason is going to be big for Theo Johnson, because if you can go out there and handle business, that's how you make your way, not just on the field. You give Brian Daboll that confidence, Keith, as a former coach. You know how much that confidence and trust from the coaches goes a long way. You getting on the field, then we might see some 12 personnel at a high rate with Theo Johnson and Daniel Bellinger, especially because you don't have a Saquon Barkley anymore. You want to try and get the run game going. You want to give Daniel Jones those hard play action looks to be able to put the ball in the belly of the running back, pull it out, and get it, and turn his head and get to somebody quick. And a lot of Malik Neighbors, of course, right? You get the run game going, you get a play action with a slant to Malik Neighbors, that could be an 80-yard touchdown. You know what I mean? Those type of things is what can come about if Theo Johnson takes that step if Darren Waller does retire.
Yeah, and we talked about the Giants in relation. Well, first, I think we talked about like their drafts right in the past with Jalen Hyatt, Malik Neighbors, Wanda Robinson, right? And then we also talked about it in relation to slot wide receivers, to similar profiles, right? To similar strengths. And so I think the importance for which would have been a Darren Waller, but it's Theo Johnson in this case, right? If Darren Waller retires, is that Theo gets to play that big body guy, right? And I think about a middle of the field player, right? Like you're talking about cover two, somebody that can run, that can split the safeties, right? Or just having that big body guy that Daniel Jones can get the football to. But then I also think about the red zone, DP. Is this a guy that you try those jump balls with, right? Because you talked about the athletic profile, right? His explosiveness, his vertical, his ability to jump, to just simply make it simple, right? Go over him, right? You're 6'6", jump over him, right? You get to the football before he get to the football. In the red zone, so I can see Theo being invoked in all of those different situations, and I think is necessary with how we talked about and how we described the rest of this wide receiver core, right? Everybody, being shifty, being quick, being fast, right? But who are the big body guys? And you always will talk about the phrase of building your wide receiver core like a basketball team, right? DP, they kind of went the Mavs route, right? They went Kyrie and Luka and Tim Hardaway and more Kyrie, Lukas and Tim Hardaways, right? They went that route, but I think it's very important. They need a big body guy, even if he plays just a specific role, but just somebody that can provide something different. And I agree with you that the surface for him has just, I think, started to be tapped, right? I think there's more to pull out of him and to get out of him as a player.
No, and Keith, I love that, right? Like you said, they built their team similar to the Mavs. And remember, the Mavs made a move last offseason in the draft. They got Derek Lively out of Kentucky, the big 7'1" center. Then they said, hey, let's go ahead and get Daniel Gafford and let's get some size to our team. That's what the Giants have to do with Theo Johnson. When you have a 6'6", 260-pound tight end that can do a lot of different things in the passing game. And to me, it's very simple. I think that from a passing standpoint, he's just untapped from his potential because he didn't have a lot of high quality targets or a lot of opportunities, right? Like not saying he's Sam Laporta, but it reminded me of Sam Laporta. When we watched Sam Laporta, at Iowa, it's like, man, we know the quarterback situation isn't great. We know that the quality of targets are suboptimal, and it's like, well, I still see qualities that, man, if you get him with a good quarterback or a good offense and you dial his number up, he can do some things for you. And I think Theo Johnson can do the same thing. So I'm excited, just like I said, get deeper into this ramp up period, through this summer, and get to training camp, get the pads on, see how he handles physicality at the NFL level, get that after getting his feet wet. Okay, you gonna jump back in the pool, or you gonna sit up there on the two steps and just chill? If he goes back out there and still be able to acclimate himself, then we get to preseason and you're making plays in both the run and pass game. You're gonna almost make yourself undeniable to get into the lineup and make some plays in the regular season as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think I would say even without the retirement of Darren Waller, right? I would have expected for some type of Theo Johnson appearance. But if Darren Waller retires, then 100% I'm expecting to see some Theo Johnson and hope that he gets invoked, and then just hope that my guy, Mr. Daniel Jones, can get him the football. And we'll see how that goes, DP. But let's keep this thing going and let's keep it flowing, man. What are we talking next? We're talking about Anthony Richardson. We're talking about his slot wide receiver, Mr. Josh Downs, and them building a chemistry through OTAs, and what are the expectations for these two guys moving forward? Coming up next.
This next segment is brought to us by our sponsor, BetterHelp. Sometimes we all need the opportunity to get something off our chest. Big or small, certain things can really start to get to you. It's important to let that out, especially to someone who's unbiased on your life. So today I want to say how I really feel about something. You might even be thinking about the same thing later this week. Guys, It is summertime, time to spend time with the family, to go out, to be outside, to enjoy ourselves. And living in South Carolina, that the sun is out. You really get to take my son, ride his bike. We can go to the pool. We can go to the park. Just being able to decompress from such a busy draft season and just enjoy life. And guys, I'm telling you, you might want to do the same thing. So therapy can be different for everyone. Most of us have bigger problems than our favorite sports teams, and it's important to get things off your chest every once in a while. So if you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online and designed to be flexible and suited to your schedule. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon. Building chemistry. The Indianapolis Colts finished, I believe they finished out OTAs, last weekend. Shout out to my guy Jake Arthur. He's also part of the co-host team of the Locked On Colts podcast over there with my guy Zach Hicks. So shout out to them, to those boys over there in Indy. And he wrote, he emptied out his journal from practice. And one of the blurbs that really caught my eye, Keith, he said, with Michael Pittman out of the lineup this week, receiver Josh Downs was heavily involved, catching what must have been double-digit passes throughout 7-on-7s and 11-on-11s. His chemistry with Richardson is undeniable, and if Pittman were to have to miss time for any reason during the regular season, prepare to see an incredibly heavy dose of Josh Downs in the passing game. And I love hearing that, and it took me back to last year when they both were drafted. And I remember them talking about, rookie minicamp, they're roommates, they're outside in the parking lot at night, and they're just throwing the ball. They can't sleep. Yeah. They're just throwing the ball and just kind of getting that chemistry down. And it's like those type of things that it translates over. It's like having a second string quarterback taking the reps with a rookie, a quarterback and rookie receiver coming in, but they're both second string behind established veterans or, whatever. And then they come into the game and it's like, man, like these boys ain't missing the beat. Like, no, because we're used to practicing together. We're on the same team and things like that. And most of my passes are going to him in practice. I know how he breaks and things of that nature. Even going back to watching the film, because I know I had the Colts in my NFL region over at the Draft Network, and watching Anthony Richardson early in the season, the trust was already there with Josh Downs. And Josh Downs had close to 800 yards, with mostly playing with Gardner Minshew. I think he eclipsed 1,000 if Anthony Richardson stays in the game, stays healthy throughout the entire season. Because there were throws that you don't make as an NFL quarterback unless you trust that guy to make that play. When you got a high-low coverage with a linebacker underneath and a safety closing in, a bracket in the seams, and you still throw a complete missile to a receiver into that window, that's trust. To throw a 7 route with the same type of coverage, a bracket or a high-low read from the defense, safety over the top, a corner dropping off in the underneath spot, and to still throw that corner route, that 7 route in that window, that's trust. And I think if they're consistently building this on, I would be shocked by reading that blurb from my guy, Jake. I'd be shocked, even if Michael Pittman is healthy, that Josh Downs isn't right up there with him in terms of targets. Because again, it's not so much who gets the most money that varies, or makes the claim that, hey, you should get the 150 targets. Is who does the quarterback feel most comfortable with? And what is typically the safety blanket for a quarterback, especially young ones? It's the slot receiver and the tight ends. And until the tight ends become more consistent, I think Josh Downs is due for a big season, Keith.
Yeah, no, I can see that being the case, right? And the reason is that I think it's important that they have a good chemistry, just because it's what is he? You almost want to call Anthony Richardson like a red shirt freshman, right? So some of these things he's going to be going through, right? He's seen it already. Some of these things he's going to be going through, he's going to see it for the very first time, right? And having that slot wide receiver, and we know what the role, and I would say that Tom Brady made it most popular, right? Just those slot wide receivers that you almost look at them as security blankets, just like you look at the big tight end, right? Because they're right there in the middle of the field, the easy throw for you, the easy completion percentage, right? And then also if you have the guys who dynamic like Josh Downs, right, they can get the extra yardage to run after the catchability. So I think that's a really good sign for Josh Downs and Anthony Richardson, if you're talking about Colts fans, right? Because you're able to get Anthony Richardson, get him comfortable with a guy that's sitting right there in the middle of the field. And we know how many sight adjustments happen in the NFL, right? Where you have the option routes and things like that, to where the quarterback and the wide receiver have to see it the same way. They have to be on the same page. The only way that you're able to see something the same way that somebody else sees it is through repetitions, right? We have to spend time with each other. It's natural, right? Like, for me to know who you are, I have to spend time with you, right? To know how you see those type of things. So them working together and building a good chemistry, I think, is a good situation. And I also think it's going to provide balance to this offense because of how their wide receivers are. When you talk about Michael Pittman, you talk about Alec Pierce, right? You talk about A.D. Mitchell, all of these big body guys who can push vertical up the field. I think now when you talk about adding to Josh Downs, you have a middle of the field worker, and he's different stylistically. And maybe he can force some mismatches in the middle of the field.
100%. And I think that's going to, like you said, that's going to be the big thing. This is a quick winner. So you're talking about being able to get the ball out quickly, 1st and 10. Think about facing teams that wants to blitz.
Yeah, that's what I was. Yeah, I wasn't thinking about 1st and 10. I was thinking about 3rd and 4, right? 3rd and 4 with the blitz, right? Who do you go 100%. To?
Like, if you're dealing with a defense that wants to try and light you up and make you get out of your comfort zone and make you uncomfortable in the pocket, having that guy to where you have, for one, to have the mental connection where you can just look at him, give him that signal, like, all right, you see it too? Okay, I see it. Say less. Snap. They send those two defenders, a linebacker in the corner, that nickel blitz off the fire zone, get the ball out quick, right into the flats. And the route running ability, the quick rip routes and pivots, and just the quick stuff that Josh Downs is able to do. Everything he did at North Carolina, that stuff translated as a rookie. And now I do think that he may be in line for especially because, again, as we talked about, I think it was last week or recently, A.D. Mitchell and the Alec Pierce situation, like, at the end of the day, like, that Z receiver spot is going to have to, they're going to have to figure that out, like, who's going to be the mainstay at that spot, whether it's Pierce or Adonai. But we know who's going to be at the X. That's Michael Pittman Jr. And we know who's going to be at that slot. So those two constants going to be there. And I think those two guys should be the kind of walking favorites to be the target hogs in this offense, while the Z spot may be more of the, whether it's Pierce or Adonai, be that deep option for him. Okay, you want to shade over to the left, leave my guy, that Z receiver, one-on-one on the island. Let's give a quick play action. Let's get set, and let's go ahead and uncork a bomb. This offense is going to be a lot of fun to watch evolve with year 2 in Shane Steichen, but also now prayerfully, a fully healthy season for Anthony Richardson. I think Josh Downs is going to be a big weapon for him in the middle of this, and just in the middle of the field, and underneath stuff, red zone, all of it. They use him in motion and stuff too.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. DP, well, let's talk about a name that's flying under the radar, man. And we're staying in the AFC South, right? Go from Indianapolis Colts, man, to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Mr. Parker Washington, DP, a guy that we did the deep dive on a couple years ago, right? I think he had one big game last year in prime time. I can't remember who it was against. I want to say Chicago. I don't know why. But he had a big time game, and we talk about a wide receiver core that had some turnover, right? They lost Calvin Ridley. There are going to be some targets that needed to be handed out. They also signed a couple guys. But I think Parker Washington's skill set, much like we just talked about Josh Downs, right, is one that can be carved out and one that is important for offense. So let's talk about Parker Washington and him making strides in OTAs and what that can mean for Mr. Trevor Lawrence himself trying to get back to the playoffs.
The NBA Finals are set, guys, and we got the Dallas Mavericks versus the Boston Celtics, and that game kicks off tonight. Guys, Game Time makes getting NBA Finals tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer it gets to tip-off. With killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and their lowest price guarantee, Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. If you're a Celtics fan, if you're a Mavs fan, or just a fan in the area and you want to go to one of these games, Game Time app already has these tickets for the games uploaded right now, and you can go ahead and get your tickets. So take the guesswork buying NBA tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, use the redeem code LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Thank you for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen today and every day. Shout out for being our everydayers. Parker Washington receiving some praise from head coach Doug Peterson, saying that he is having a great offseason. And the game that you were referring to, Keith, I know exactly what game you were talking about. It was December 4th. Monday Night Football versus the Cincinnati Bengals. Game went into overtime. He was 6 for 6 targets, 6 receptions, 61 yards receiving, and he had a touchdown. And that was the game that you kind of saw, man, like this is what he can do when he's on the field and getting targets. And we actually feature him in some capacity into this offense. But losing Calvin Ridley, yeah, you drafted Brian Thomas Jr. You brought in Gabe Davis from Buffalo, right? You have Christian Kirk. And I think for him, Christian Kirk probably was one of the bigger beneficiaries from Christian Kirk, because their games are very similar in terms of their stature, how they win, where they win the most, typically mostly lined inside. And I think for an offense that has two big outside threats that can take the top off and be deep threats, you need some people when you go 10, 11 personnel, like different things like that. You need somebody that's going to be work the underneath the intermediate stuff. And while you still have Christian Kirk, I think having Parker Washington emerge will only help that case, especially because what you're trying to do with Trevor Lawrence, you said, get back to the playoffs, man. Like that, and you're in a division. We just finished talking about the Colts. You also got Will Levis and Calvin Ridley and DeAndre Hopkins and Tyler Boyd and Treylon Burks and all those guys in Tennessee. Then we know what's in Houston right now. You know what I mean? We know what's in Houston. So it's like you need this to take a step forward, because I've been saying for a long time, I feel like Trevor Lawrence will get back to being Trevor Lawrence when you give him a T. Higgins, Justin Ross type of receiver, those big body guys that can win vertically, whether stacking and with speed, but also at the catch point, which both Gabe Davis and Brian Thomas Jr. can do. But don't get it twisted. When he was at Clemson, he also did good work with Amari Rodgers as that kind of shorter slot receiver type.
Yep.
So
kind of similar body profiles also.
100%. Like they're built very similar. So I think that they need Parker Washington to take that step, because Doug Peterson can get creative with his formations, where it comes out and it looks like it's 11, or you know what I mean, or because you got a back in the backfield, but that's actually Christian Kirk, and then you motion Christian Kirk out into the opposite slot. Then you have Parker Washington in the slot. Now you go empty. And you got, you know what I'm saying, just different ways to stress a defense. And that's what they're going to need to do, especially because they can run the ball, but you got to get this passing game going for Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, I'm with that. And I want to talk about Parker Washington, right? And just who he is, I guess, as a player / prospect, and just what you have to do, right, to win in the NFL. And we know that this guy, pretty sure his 40 time was, I think appropriate word is average, right? He had average 40 time, average measurables across the board, right? So he was a guy in the draft process that early on we identified, and he was the year after Jahan Dotson, I believe. It was like, okay, Penn State have another, good wide receiver, right? And then it seems like very similar to how we talked about, Cam Kinchins and James Williams and some of those guys, that the draft process just wasn't good to Parker Washington, right? But what you have to do is, and I'm assuming that he kind of did this his rookie year, right? Was that identify your strengths, right? And don't even worry about your weaknesses necessarily, right? Just identify your strengths and what are you going to tap in to win the game. And we always talk about basketball and different sports on here. I liken it to a Draymond Green situation, right? Draymond is not a great shooter. He's not extremely athletic. He's not a great passer. You know what I'm saying? But you have to identify what you can provide for a team to make that starting lineup, or what you can provide the team to make that 53-man roster. And I think what Parker Washington can provide, And we've seen this before, right? We've seen 4'6", 4'6'5" wide receivers survive in the NFL because they're high IQ players. They know how to beat zone. They know how to, they don't have any wasted movements, right? When they're breaking off their routes, and they know how to gain separation at the very top of their route, right? They become slot dominant guys because they just understand how to work spacing, get open, and catch the football. And I think Parker Washington, while he fell in the draft because he doesn't check all the boxes and the RAS score and all of those things, there's still a certain level of what's inside you, right? As far as the heart, as far as the IQ, as far as the want to, as far as the ability to adjust and to adapt to what's going on in front of you. And I think that's the part where we have to live at with Parker Washington, him being a 6th round pick and then playing in the NFL.
And he's built similar to Amari St. Brown, Golden Tate, like those type of receivers. And I'm not saying that he's going to become those guys where it's like high volume targets in their respective situations, but he can do some similar things. And we saw that at Penn State when they gave him quality target. I always come back to quality targets, which is not a thing for Penn State.
Keyword being quality, right?
Quality target. Like when they gave him quality targets, he was able to make plays, but not just make plays, just running the routes and getting to a spot. He was able to make the plays after the catch as well, right? And it's like, all right, let's implement some of that into this Jaguars offense. And maybe you don't have to go out there and try and chase a Stephon Diggs next year if he's a free agent, or chase the next big cash cow, especially after paying the Trevor Lawrence. If Parker Washington can take that step, it's going to help this offense on the field and in the salary cap situation, because you're going to be able to pay Trevor Lawrence and keep him. Have cheap Parker Washington, a cheap contract for Brian Thomas Jr., and different things like cash efficient contracts where you can then use money on defense and keep building the defense up, or improve your offensive line. Like whatever it is, watch if he can make that step, it lessens the need to find another receiver in 2025. That way you can apply your resources elsewhere.
Yep, I agree with that 100%, DP, and it should make for a good situation overall, just with the Jacksonville Jaguars. And I expect his role to increase from what it did last year to this year, and it should be fun just to see what trajectory or type of trajectory that he's on, because we know Doug Peterson, he's a guy that's willing to think outside of the box too, I believe, right? Like in 6th round, he's not just going to put you in that box. He's going to like, okay, what can you provide for us and what role can you fit for this offense? And if you know what, you have a skill set, let's play you to that role. So we'll see how that thing goes. But DP, that wraps up another episode, man, of the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast. I want to say shout out to our everydayers. Thank you for tapping in with us each and every single day. Listen, man, I am Keith Sanchez. You can find me on X at The Talent Code. That right there, my guy, my co-host, Mr. Damian Parson. You can find him on X at DP_NFL. And like we always like to say, man, y'all come talk to us because we like to talk back.
Go subscribe and follow for free on YouTube, wherever you listen to podcasts, to get the latest episode as soon as it is available. Thank you for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen today, and every day shout for being our everydayers. On tomorrow's show, close out the week on Friday, I'm going to get into Travis Hunter, the wide receiver prospect. Will he grade out higher at corner or wide receiver? Stay tuned for that, and come and join the conversation again tomorrow on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.